Hello friends, this is Chad Wooders, oil painter, and I'm going to show you how to do a tonal realist landscape, or at least how I do one, starting with the underpainting, and then in the next videos you'll see the dead layer, followed by the first color layer, and then the finishing layers. So enjoy this video, and we'll start by taking a quick look at the palette. So let's talk about the palette we're going to be using. It's basically three pigments plus the gel medium. So left to right, we're going to start with the Galkid medium. The next color is Ivory Black, Transparent Earth Red, and Transparent Earth Yellow. Now I've arranged these all at the top of the palette, which is typical, and I've left room on the right-hand side for white pigment so that when I get ready to do the dead layer, my palette is already organized. Today I'm working on a 3/4 inch plywood panel. I've trimmed it down to, yeah, it's about 18 inches by 22 inches. Um, I really think that's a really nice proportion to work with. Um, what I'm doing now is I'm putting down a very thin layer of the Galka gel across the entire surface. I'm keeping it very, very thin while I'm doing this. The other thing you can see is I'm doing a lot of bending and ducking here because I have the light set up so that that window produces a raking light across the surface, and I can use the glare to determine that I've covered all the area because I'm applying basically a clear medium on a white surface. It's very difficult to see if I've gotten it all. So I'm going to just keep going on that. And there we go. There's the finishing touches. All right. So now I've picked out the main brushes that I'm going to be using. It's one for each tone. They're fairly good size. They're about the width of my finger. That one's a Lang nickel. I've got some Isabeys in there. You can tell by the yellow handle. I step back about 5 feet. Now I kind of already know in my mind what I want to do. I want to do kind of like two concentric circles with a horizon on the lower level. And I've accumulated a lot of visual memory from my walks about that, about landscapes. So I'm going to be relying on that. Now you can see I'm mixing in a little bit of gel medium into each one of these. I use the same kind of stroke that with the palette knife that I use for just generally mixing paint. So that's a rectangular palette knife with a bent handle. The bent handle keeps you from getting your knuckles into the paint. And then I can just scrape it up and then slap it back down and blend it out. So it's, again, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. You get into kind of a rhythm, and I really enjoy mixing paint myself, actually. I find it very comforting, and not so much with the Galkid gel, but I do enjoy the smell of linseed oil in general. And you see that I'm doing that with the transparent oxide yellow, or transparent earth yellow. And there it is, and you can see that the Galkid is pretty stiff gel, and you can move around the palette. The paint isn't gonna drip off, or you don't have to worry about anything like that. And you usually want things to be mixed about to the consistency of whipped butter, I think is about correct for good application. Now, different pigments have a different stiffness, and you'll find that especially true of the Gamblin paints. They grind them specifically for the type. And you got to start somewhere, so I start with the horizon. And as I mentioned, I really want to work with this idea of the flowing concentric circles of the eye, and then also when I do my clouds, I want to make sure that they correspond to some sense of perspective. So I'm just kind of throwing in a few guidelines there. I've laid in a line there vertically. I think you noticed kind of where my eye wants to be in there. And this is kind of where I deviate a little bit from well, not a little bit. This is where I deviate from the classical approaches. A lot of people talk about the golden section or rule of thirds and all that kind of stuff, and that's all very interesting. But those are just rules of thumb, and I hate to say it, but kind of like a more scientific point of view. Having studied a lot of optical phenomena, I know that the size of this particular canvas matches a very good aspect ratio for the human visual system. And the concentric circles that I've laid out are kind of corresponding to where I expect a kind of a 3% field of vision to move from one side to the other, based on a viewing distance of about 5 feet back. One thing I've noticed about beginning painters, particularly students, is they tend to be very timid when they paint. They don't put a lot of paint on their brush, and then when they do it, they just kind of dabble a little bit with uncertain strokes. And you see that I'm not like that at all. I'm very bold. I put it on there. And then, if I don't like the shape, I take it off. So you're going to see throughout this demonstration, I'll cut out some portions because I tend to go back and forth a lot. I like to work it. There I'm kind of like, I want to work those lines. A lot of this is going to be painted over, actually. And as the painting is developed, but somehow or another, the ghost of those early movements, the ghost of the early tones, they all kind of percolate through and give the painting character. Yeah, I laid in some of that dark of the foreground. I like actually doing the underpainting with the three different pigments. It, if you work entirely tonal, say like a charcoal drawing, or if your underpainting is entirely done in raw umber, and I've done that a lot. One of the difficulties that you face is the borders between objects when it occurs in the same tone. You're not really defining it. If an object has almost the same tone, but it's a different hue, you won't pick that up in that underpainting or be able to make that distinction within the underpainting, except by introducing line work into the painting, which is something I, as a tonal realist, really don't want to do. So, like I said, I find that working with the three different pigments, like I'm doing right now, see, I've shifted over to the yellow pigment, the transparent. It used to be called transparent oxide yellow. I keep calling it that, but it's a transparent earth by Gamblin. That's going to lay out that foreground there, and mix that in. It goes on pretty dark, but when the ground starts to come through, you can see that it's fairly light. And then when you start whipping those brushes around like that, it starts to pick up some of the colors of the adjacent surfaces and become contaminated. So before I picked up a new brush before I started in the sky area there. As a reminder, you can never have enough brushes. You will use a lot of brushes. You will want to change your brushes when, the colors that you're picking up off your palette and putting down on the surface are altered because of some contamination from another color, from another area of the canvas, or a different, or the brush already had a little bit of white in it or something like that. So just use a new brush. Don't fight it. Yep, be bold, and really the brush strokes don't matter at this point. Um, it's all gonna get blended out so many times and so many layers on top. But I think the important thing is to not commit to a hard edge at this point or until you absolutely have to. And you can see I'm kind of like blending it down there with a paper towel, just kind of spreading it around, making sure that the entire surface is tinted in some way. Uh, Definitely don't want the white showing through. That's just, I don't like that look. You'll see me do this several times, putting it on and then kind of blending it out. But then it's not, gets a little indistinct. Then I'll redefine it. Then I'll blend it down a little bit. And each time you get just a little bit closer. Yeah, I'm going to start laying in the trees. At least kind of where I think they would go. And I know this is a little more detail than I really want to do at this point, uh, but I'm just kind of feeling it out now. And that's the great thing about oil paint is you don't have to commit too much to something. Um, you can just let it become what it wants to be. Now, at this point, somebody say, "Oh, yeah, you're working on a landscape. If you're working on a portrait or something, it'd have to look exactly like." Yeah, and that's true to some extent. There's a lot more freedom. Nobody really cares where a branch looks like as long as you get the general um, look of the tree, correct species and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, um, you know, the tonal realist process lends itself to both very highly realistic process and also, a more intuitive one like this that I'm using right now. Um, you would still go through the same layering process. You would just probably spend a little more, take a little more caution in the positioning and whatnot than I'm doing right now. If you were doing something that was based, say, like a still life or something, portrait. Yeah, at this point, I've kind of decided that where my main light source is going to be, it's actually going to be on the left-hand side behind those trees, the first stand of trees that I created, which is the darkest side facing you, more of a sunrise view. And so you see that I'm also laying the shadow out from that stand to the right of it, so that because that's the direction that that light is going to be coming from. Again, I do use a lot of paper towels and whatnot. Put the paint on, take it off if I don't quite like it. It's also a lot easier on a panel like this. One of the advantages of the panel is it's a smoother surface, so when you do wipe something off, you definitely wipe more of it off. Whereas if you work on a canvas that's textured, some of that's going to remain embedded in the texture of the canvas, and you won't be able to quite scrape it off the way you would otherwise. Um, that's both an advantage and a disadvantage. So the texture actually kind of holds the paint initially where you put it. So if you do have strokes that are very accurate initially, they'll tend to remain. In this case, though, I like the advantage of the panel is also I believe that you get more luminosity reflected and coming back at the viewer than on, say, just a typical canvas. I remember as I was doing this in the back of my mind, I kind of had in my the head that wanted the major stand on the left-hand side there to be taller and the other than the one that I'm working on right now. But I also retain the memory of that initial circles that I did. Now you can see I've started little jumped ahead a little bit in time. You can see how now those three different pigments, the yellow, the red, and the black, kind of work together to help define the objects a little bit better, help understand the painting a little bit more than if it was just a purely black and white in the underpainting. Now, as I work, the Galcid medium is actually starting to firm up a little bit. Uh, it'll start to firm up, after the first hour or so, and then be completely dry overnight. All right, I guess we'll just jump ahead a little here. Okay, I've kind of knocked down some of I'm putting in some streaks for the lighting there, for the clouds, smoothing it out. Can never keep my hands out of the painting. Look at that. Yeah. Yeah, go to town. I love it. I can do that because the Galcud's starting to firm up a little bit. but it's actually kind of just smoothing it out. Here you go. See what I'm doing? This is that technique. It's called tonking. Put a sheet of paper over that and over the painting, and then you lightly press down. It removes excess paint. So, if the brush stroke leaves a furrow where it's extra thick, that'll kind of pick that up. And then I take my big brush and I just kind of start blending that out. The other thing that does is it doesn't just make the surface smoother, but it takes all the furrows of the bristle brushes that I use and kind of fills those and smooths those out, so you don't see the white of the canvas underneath. You just have uh, the tint of the transparent pigment spread out across the surface. As I start to get near the end of the underpainting, because I basically covered the entire surface, now I start to fuss a little bit. Uh, maybe blend that area out a little bit more. I really want to get those light rays in there. Those are going to be an important element as far as the overall design. You can also see I'm wiping out some of that area where I want it to be lighter. Even when I wipe off the paint, I tend to be a little more random in my motions. Um, you know, little circle, then up and down and around. Uh, I think that's very important to not have a grain on the painting. You see that in a lot of pastel artists and colored pencil. They always kind of like work the same direction. And I think that's appropriate for those mediums. That's part of the character of it. When it comes to oil painting, though, I don't see the value in brush strokes other than sort of those master strokes at the very end. Um, I'm not a big fan of impasto, the heavy impasto layering. Uh, I like the smooth effects. I like the transparent effects. I don't like to see the brush strokes per se, only to the extent that they depict something or represent something. Hey, now in this next video, this is the dead layer. So this is the painting after the dead layer. So the next video you're going to want to see in this series is the dead layer. It occurs immediately after the underpainting, and this is what it's going to look like. So click, just subscribe so make sure you don't, you miss that video. And also check the description. I have a list of all the products that I use, the Gamblin paints, the Isabey brushes. It links to my Blick University web course where you can buy all those items. All right. Happy painting. Look forward to the next video, and we'll talk again soon. And now a word from our sponsor.
Hi, my name's Chad Wooders, and I'm here to show you another great arthritis life hack. This time I'm showing you the small cap opener by Fixotropic. It's a flat piece of metal. It has an angled opening to accommodate multiple size caps and sharp teeth that will bite into the plastic of the cap. Here I'm going to demonstrate it using a tube of oil paint. As you can see, it's old, it's crusty, pretty nasty overall. The cap is stuck on there very tightly, and for somebody who would have to pinch and twist at the same time and has arthritis, it would be very difficult to open. In this case, the metal cap opener, you just press it onto the cap, hold it firmly, and rotate the tube. That loosens the cap, all right, so that now it's much easier to open normally. Thank you very much. Bye.